Activate Your Introvert, the weekly show to help leaders build performance by understanding introversion. In this week's show, Leadership Tip of the Week, helping the quieter members of your team engage in small talk. A discussion with Sabrina Ahmed. Sabrina helps introverted fintech managers achieve a guilt-free and energized life balance by integrating daily neuroscience and psychology-informed techniques. Question of the week: why do introverts hate small talk? Introvert myth of the week: introverts don't like to chat. Just before speaking to Sabrina, a quick request for your help. Press pause. No, I know you don't normally get asked to do that on a podcast, but if you're enjoying understanding more about introversion and leadership from the show, I want your help, so others can benefit too. You can help by pausing this recording, going to iTunes and giving this show a review, hopefully 5 stars. The algorithms will then help more people see the show and listen to it. This week, I was doing a trawl of the newspapers that I had missed during the summer holidays. Yeah, I know, it's getting colder now, it's got to September. An item stood out for me. It was in the Daily Telegraph, and it was reported that cars are getting bigger. My first reaction was, duh, I know that. Have you tried to get a modern car into a garage that's built in the 80s or before? Or, as the Telegraph put it, just as children have grown up taller in the past generation, so new cars have grown in length. Like parents, new cars have also been getting fatter. Well, I hope they didn't gain those stats from me, but they're probably right. Moving on quickly though. Apparently, the 5 top-selling cars are on average a foot wider than the equivalent in 1965. As parking spaces and garages are no wider, it's getting harder to park. Just at the time when we're supposed to be going greener, which would logically mean smaller cars. Yet, as the Telegraph puts it, they swell like prize marrows. Here's a non-related question for you to consider. Well, maybe non-related. And I'd love your thoughts on the Facebook page. Do you think people's egos have got bigger in the last 15 years? Just at the time when we understand so much more about managing people, egotistical behaviour seems, to me at least, to be getting more of an issue. This seems to be especially troubling for introverts who tend to be less impressed with a swollen ego. Answer the poll in the show notes and let me know your thoughts. Is it a problem in your firm? If it's affecting people in your team, then it is. How can we deal with it? Being aware of the issue is a great starting place. Many people just don't realise that consistent showing off is putting others off, or they just don't care. This can reduce the way members of the team chat with each other, which of course includes small talk. It can change the effectiveness of team meetings, and it arises in many other guises. Well-facilitated team feedback sessions are often a good place to start. Whether you want to call it 360-degree or a wider team feedback session, it doesn't really matter. Starting with some confidentially answered questions and leading into an open team discussion can help to unearth the issues. Resolving the issues which this process can unearth can make a huge difference to a team that's not only related to egotistical behaviours. My many years of experience of running these sessions says that in one form or another, communication is often big in the list. A well-run session will help you find results from the team and action points for everybody. It's never okay if there's only one person or type of person who's taking all of the actions. What would you like to know about introversion in business? This week's question comes from Alice. Why do introverts hate small talk? Alice, it's a great question, although it's very right and very wrong. Not all introverts hate small talk, and 20% of extroverts I've asked also hate small talk. However, as I said, you're spot on in that there's a big perception about introverts and small talk. 70% of them don't like it, and that includes me, by the way, even though I've been told I can't be introverted as I'm chatty. My quick answer to the question will follow in a second. But if you'd like to download my 23-page guide to small talk, which looks at what it is, why introverts hate it, and how you can get better at it, there's a link in the show notes. When I've surveyed for this, common answers come back as small talk is vacuous and inauthentic. Great word, that one, isn't it? Seems to pop up everywhere nowadays. Or listening to this rubbish makes me cringe. An interesting one, small talk is okay until it's not. This one covers people who are okay with it and then suddenly feel the need to escape it. 2 important points about introversion might help to unpick some of these answers. Number 1, people energy. Most introverts are de-energized spending time with people, where being in a group of people energizes most extroverts. And number 2, internal processing. Most introverts think to talk, and extroverts talk to think. Introverts try to give a complete, accurate and well-structured answer. This may lead to a small gap in the conversation as they construct that answer, and some introverts are sensitive about this gap as they've been made to feel bad about it. This means introverts may not want to lose energy in a discussion they feel awkward about being in. Add a dislike of irrelevant discussion and, well, there's an inbuilt dislike before we go any further. So that's my answer, Alice, although more importantly, why should we care? If we can help the introverts in our team join in with conversations more easily, we can improve teamwork. For ideas on that, download your copy of my just updated book on small talk from the show notes. What question would you like answered on the show? Whether you want to be on the show or just have your question answered like Alice, go to activateyourintrovert.co.uk where there's a box for you to ask your question. You could also follow on Facebook and discuss the answers at the show's page, Activate Your Introvert. But now, it's time for this week's interview. Hi Sabrina, how are you doing?
Hi John, I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm really good indeed. It's lovely to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your time. When I was chatting to you beforehand and looking at the introduction, I loved the piece about guilt-free and energized life balance. What do you mean by guilt-free? Why do people feel guilty?
That's a really good question, John. And I think a lot of people feel under pressure to do all the things, do them all to a certain high standard. So that could be high performing at work, be the best parent, be a great friend. All of the things on our life list, we end up getting very caught up in having very high standards about. And there's only so much energy that we can give to those things. And a lot of that, not being able to reach those high standards can drive feelings of guilt. So it's really tapping into what might cause people to feel guilty and ease some of the stresses they have around that.
Okay. And is that especially prevalent in fintech? Because obviously that's where you focus.
I think, my kind of career over the past 20 years has been, in and out of financial services and technology companies and mining as well. Very high pressure environments, very complex, large organizations, where you're having to be all things to everyone a lot of the time, doing long days, but also trying to manage family life. So it's definitely something that I've noticed in my career with my colleagues and looking at senior management as well.
And the other thing, of course, you touch on in there is neuroscience.
Yes.
What is it?
The neuroscience is the study of the nervous system and the central nervous system, of which the brain is clearly a key part of that. So I did my undergraduate degree over 20 years ago in neuroscience before it became cooler, like it is now. And then I came back to it and did a psychology and neuroscience degree a few years ago. So it's very much about how the central nervous system and peripheral nervous system work, either from a genetic perspective all the way up to kind of functioning circuits, systems.
What does neuroscience tell us about introversion and extroversion then?
So it's still a very young field, but there is a burgeoning personality neuroscience field, which is looking into different aspects of extroversion and introversion. Most of the research tends to use the big 5 personality dimensions. So they found that extroversion and introversion as a spectrum is related to reward sensitivity, so parts of the reward system, and also the kind of mu opioid system, which is around liking and enjoying things. So,
and that's where the dopamine thing comes in.
The dopamine is more related to the reward and kind of drive. And then the mu opioid is related to that and more related to liking the reward.
Okay.
There's two aspects of the reward system.
And so introversion is getting a scientific approval. It does exist. It's not something which is invented by people that are quiet and shy then.
No, exactly. And I think, the key thing is that there is a difference in the way extroverts are driven by reward, and also the levels at which they like the reward versus, people that are at the other end of the spectrum. So that seems to be what influences the two aspects of extroversion and introversion around assertiveness and around enthusiasm.
Okay. And so that then comes back to the neuroscience underpinning of that. So is that the neuroscientific underpinning, is that genetic, or is that something we learn and we create ourselves?
Some of it is genetic. So there are kind of studies that look at certain aspects of the brain from a receptor perspective. So there are genetic differences, but a lot of the brain is very influenced by experience and environment. And that's where we learn contextual association. So that's also something that seems to be stronger in extroverts, that they associate reward with their contextual environment more specifically. So they will tend to like things in a certain environment more than others. So it's definitely a combination.
I'm kind of tempted to say, can you expand on that? But I'm not quite sure what the right question would be.
It is, like I said, it's a very new kind of part of the research, building on existing research, but kind of trying to adapt it more from a behavioral perspective. So if you think about reward in terms of our drive to do things, and the dopamine system is very much there to essentially be a prediction error mechanism. So am I going to put the effort into doing something because it's worth the reward or worth the payoff? And then secondary to that is, will I actually like the payoff? So if you think about from an extroversion perspective, they tend to be more driven and more kind of active and motivated to do things because they're just more aware of the rewards and like the rewards more than perhaps introverts might be.
Sitting there going, but I like the rewards I like, but yeah, I guess we like them in ways.
Yeah, the types of activities you will choose that you like are likely to be different. That's what distinguishes us from extroverts.
Yeah. How well do you think business leaders understand introversion?
I think there's more awareness of introversion, but I don't think there's necessarily the teaching behind how to actually handle introversion. There's still a huge extroversion bias, I think, in terms of what makes a good leader. Well, it's someone who commands the room very loudly and speaks up and is, the stereotypical kind of alpha type characteristics, I guess. And we know that from the research and the analysis that there are many types of successful leaders. You don't have to be a loud, kind of verbally driven person to be a good leader. There are many different successful leaders out there with all sorts of personality traits. So I think there's still a long way to go in the industry for people to really understand how introversion manifests and also how to manage people that are introverted.
So leaders could manage introverts differently, is what you're implying there. What would be the benefit of doing so?
I think with any good manager, they're able to adapt their management style to their people so that they're able to actually bring out the best characteristics of their people, whether they're introverted or extroverted or really diligent or great with numbers or whatever it is. I think the role of a good manager is to really match their people's skills and develop their people so that they find work fulfilling, they're able to achieve whatever goals and objectives there are.
And in doing so, they'll get more productivity and more from their team. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense.
I think it's just being more flexible.
The other thing that we touched on earlier, because I asked, is some of this introversion genetic? If I'm an introvert, well, I am, but if I'm an introvert and I work for somebody, I've heard managers who say things like, just change the way you do things. Can we adapt our personality?
I believe we can if we want to. And I think a lot of, we're very contextually driven, and that's why they differentiate between trait which is kind of your baseline level, and state, which is kind of how you are within a specific time period and context. We do it all the time naturally. Some situations you might need to be a certain way, in other situations you'll be another way. And I think if we're driven by things that are important to us and our values, and we're consistently doing something that, reaches or aims for meaningful goals, then you can start to build new habits, essentially, and new ways of being. You may just need to build in more activities that restore your energy if you find it particularly draining.
I think that's a really big one, because I often talk about the importance of habits. The more we can make things the way we do things on a regular basis, the better we become. However, and I think you just touched on it there, even though I can learn a whole number of tactics to change the way I am, some people will sit there and say, John, you can't be an introvert because you love being on stage in front of thousands of people, and I do. However, I've learned it as a tactic.
Yeah.
But what I also know is that after I've spent time with a group of people, I need to go and hide in a darkened room to recover.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas an extrovert is kind of like, yay.
Yeah, exactly. They'll
keep
going. And it's all about that awareness and insight into kind of your lived experience and also how your energy levels fluctuate through the day. So I'm the same. I love catching up with certain people or groups of people. I just know I'll be quite exhausted probably afterwards. So I just need to build that into my routine.
We're coming towards the end of our time, unfortunately. I think we could carry on talking forever more. But I know. I always ask my guests for a tip. So let's have a tip for an introvert to help them to achieve a more guilt-free and energized life balance.
I think the number one thing I would say, pulling in, not just psychological aspects, but physiological aspects of our experience, is really assess how your energy fluctuates through the day and what influences that. I call them drains and radiators. So what potentially drains your energy and what is a radiator and kind of energizes you. Because I think if you're really clear on that, you can actually start to be more effective during your day.
Okay, so start to understand your drains and radiators. Like it. And how about an extrovert, perhaps an extroverted leader who wants to get more from the introverts in their team? What could they do that's different?
I really like the concept that a friend of mine uses in their kind of agile coaching teams. So they have someone within a meeting, say, that they're running, who ensures that every person in the meeting has been able to express themselves and vocalize their opinion. And that can be in different ways. It can be through chat or physically speaking, but ensuring that they are capturing the feedback of their, introverted colleagues in the most appropriate way so that everyone feels represented and that everyone feels heard. Because I think there are great contributions that go under the radar because people are only focusing on the ones that speak or are loud or maybe take a bit more social attention.
Absolutely. No, it's great tips. Thank you. And I'm sure that some of the listeners will want to get back in touch with you. What's the best way of them doing that?
The best way is to go to my website. My business is called Open Introvert, and my website is openintrovert.com. Happy to speak and get in touch.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time this morning. It's been great talking to you, Sabrina.
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me, John. Really appreciate it.
And now it's time for Introvert Myth of the Week. Those crazy stories that I hear and you hear, but some people actually believe. Introverts don't like to chat. It's an interesting myth which does of course belong in the bin. Different people may like to chat in differing amounts. They may like or dislike conversation on different subjects. Well, that could be back to small talk again. And may like or dislike conversations with some people in the group. Egotistical behaviours again, which often put off introverts from joining in. But watch an introvert in a different setting on their subject with their close friends, and there is loads of chat. If you want to encourage somebody into a conversation and make it easier for them to chat, change the conversation so they're more likely to enjoy it. Subjects, egos, volumes. But yes, it's not true to say that introverts don't like to chat because they're human and we all do it. at different times and in different ways. I'm John Baker. Thank you for listening. I hope you found it useful. There's a new episode every Thursday at activateyourinTrovert.co.uk and your favourite podcast provider. Till then, go be introversial, activating your introverts, building your business.